Well, this is nice. The first time I spoke about spiritual economics in 1991, we had a little mini seminar in San Diego Temple, and DeVito was speaking before me, and he had a full room. And then it came my turn to speak about spiritual economics, and everybody got up and left. there was 2 devotees that stayed. So we're making progress. In 20 years. We got 20 people. My name is Dhanesvara. I've been preaching in Eastern Europe for the last 5 years. I went over there to preach because there was one American psychic by the name of Edgar Casey. He made a prediction that in the future, man will learn to live for the benefit of his fellow man. And when I read that, I said, oh, that's the idea of spiritual economics. So if that's going to start in Russia, Russian-speaking countries, that's where I'm going. So I went over there, and I've had a lot of support for my preaching. And also enough support so that I could actually sit down and write the book finally. So the boys will bring me the books later. Don't let me forget about that. This idea of spiritual economics, this is actually going to be the preaching opportunity of the next decade. Now, why do I say that? Because the future is not going to be the same as the past. Okay? Guarantee it. You can find this from any number of perspectives, but basically the powers that be who control the world by economics, they've decided that they're going to create a different future than they have in the past. In my book, in chapter 4, I explain how we got the present situation that we have now. We should not think that our present economic system is just naturally evolved in a very spontaneous way. It's not at all the case. Actually, it was created very intentionally by the powers that be to be able to exploit people more and more. And we see that tendency increasing more and more as we go on in the future. So that we now have what they call predatory economics, vulture economics, disaster economics, all these kinds of terms. These are pejoratives that are actually earned because the way the people that control the world, control the money, are handling the money situation. I'm not going to talk about the book today. The book is there if you'd like to read the book, if you get one. But I'm going to talk about a more general idea of spiritual economics. And we're going to explain it from Bhagavad Gita. What's the final verse of Krishna's final instruction in Bhagavad Gita? Sarvadharmam parityaga, everybody knows it. Mamekam saranam vraja, ham tvam sarvapapebhyo mokshayishyami masutaha. Sarvadharmam parityaga. Now this is very interesting. God, who is Krishna, Krishna who is God, he says, give up all varieties of religion. What? Give up. No, we think God wants us to follow religion, but here's God, Krishna, and he's saying, no, give up all these varieties of religion. Now, why is he doing that? Mamekam saranam vraja. Surrender to me. Do what I say. Now, this verse is the summation. It's the bottom line, as they say in economics. It's the bottom line of Bhagavad Gita. So to understand that, to understand this final instruction, actually we have to go back to the beginning of Bhagavad Gita. Beginning of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is encouraging Arjuna to fight in the battle of Kurukshetra. And Arjuna is presenting a number of very good arguments to Krishna. Very good, actually, because whatever Arjuna said actually came to pass. Arjuna is telling Krishna that if we fight this battle, the men, of course, will be killed, the women will be unprotected. If the women are unprotected, the traditions will be lost. When the family traditions are lost, then the whole culture is going to collapse and everything's going to go to hell. Very good arguments, because that's exactly what happened. But Krishna said what? Never mind all that. He asked Arjuna, still, you have to fight this battle. Now, what does that mean to us? What's the lesson there for us? What is... Arjuna was making these arguments based on what?
Compassion.
That's not correct?
Not like exceptional.
Okay. Okay, let me put it this way. Where are these arguments coming from that he's presenting?
Weakness of heart.
Okay.
Not to fight.
Not to fight. That's his argument.
Fear.
Huh? Fear? Actually, no, I'm sorry. Maybe I'm not asking the question in the right way.
Preconceived notion.
The arguments that Arjuna is presenting are actually from the culture of Arjuna's time, which is Vedic culture. He says, the women have to be protected. This is the culture. And of course, the men protect the women. If the women are not protected, the family traditions will be lost. Again, this is coming from the culture. So Arjuna is raising objections to Krishna based on the culture of his time. And still Krishna is saying, no, never mind all that. Fight this battle. Why? Because that's what Krishna wanted. Which is then, we understand, is the highest morality to do what Krishna says. So we want to appreciate what was going on there, and we want to see how does this apply to us in our lives today in the 21st century. If Krishna says to us, Sarvadharmam Parityaga, this Dharma that our Krishna is talking to Arjuna, this Dharma for Arjuna was the Vedic culture. He's telling all these arguments that you gave from Vedic culture, Sarvadharmam Parityaga. That's the Dharma he's talking about. All these arguments that he gave, forget that. Instead, Mame Kam Saranam Vraja. So the same thing applies for us. What's the Dharma for us today? Now, there's a few from the Indian families. I don't know if you spent some time in India. Probably many of you devotees have been to India. And we can understand the cultural differences easier when we go to different cultures. So there's a big difference between the culture of India and the culture of America. When I speak in Eastern Europe, to give example of culture, I tell about the following anecdote when I was just a young grahasta. After my wife and we lived in the temple for 8 or 9 years, we finally moved out, got our own household. And I had a yard, and the yard had more dirt than grass. So, being a responsible grahasta, I was going to make it look nice, like the neighbors' lawns. And so I was going to go to the store and get some grass seed. And then I thought, well, wait a minute. Where's grass seed come from? It comes from grass. So why don't I let grass just grow and it'll make its own seed and then it'll look nice after some time, right? So of course this is the voice of inexperience. Right? How long does it take for that grass to produce seed and then for it to turn into a nice lawn? It's a very long time. So after some time, my grass is like this high, right? The neighbor's grass is normal, 2-3 inches high. So finally I knew I was in trouble when the neighbor, he sent his 12-year-old son over. He says, my dad wants to know when you're going to cut your grass. So this is one of the dharmas of America. You have to keep your grass cut, right? Dharma. We read in the news not too long ago, within the last year, about one 70-year-old lady. She couldn't get her grass cut. She didn't have enough money to pay anybody, so her grass grew out of control, and the police actually came and arrested her. I don't know where that was, but then there was a story of another elderly man, 80-some years old, down in Florida. His sprinkler system broke, and his grass turned brown, and so they also came to arrest him because, his yard wasn't the way it was supposed to be. So this is one of the dharmas of our country, that Krishna says, Sarva Dharma, all these things that you think you're supposed to do, don't worry about that. You do what I say here in Bhagavad Gita. So what are some of the other dharmas we have? Huh?
Make money.
To make money. Yeah, very good. That's a very important dharma for Americans. Huh? You have to. And how do you do it? Independently, right? I'm independent. Right? There's a lot of emphasis on that. I don't take any help from anybody.
Now, if you make money the wrong way, then you'll get arrested.
Yeah.
Make your own money, literally.
Do anything you can, just don't get caught.
Don't get caught. Yeah, that's the new dharma from Bush, from the new administration. When I asked this in Ukraine or Russia, they say that the dharma is you have to drink vodka, or you have to have a dog in your yard. Everybody has a dog. So the thing about culture is it's so transparent, it's so unconscious for us because we're acculturated since the time we're infants. So we don't see it, we don't understand actually how it's going on and how it's influencing our lives. And we just live in a very automatic kind of a way. We get up and we do the same thing every day, and do what we think we are supposed to do according to the culture. So this dharma, this is the kind of dharma. Krishna says, "Sarva dharma parityaya." Give it up. And I want to. Our failure to do that is actually preventing us from following Krishna's instructions in Bhagavad Gita. Now we've got a wonderful philosophy. Bhagavad Gita is the topmost, philosophical treatise of how this world works, who's God, what's our relationship with God. It's the best. But we have a problem. We don't follow it. Right? Great philosophy, but we're not following it. I'll give you some examples. What's the first? We talked about the last instruction in Bhagavad Gita. What's Krishna's first instruction in Bhagavad Gita? Yeah, you're not the body. Not tvevaham chatunasam, not pamname chanamikaham. There are time when that did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings, nor in the future shall any of us cease to be. And he goes on, Krishna speaks about 25 verses, how we're not the body, what's the nature of the soul. Then he changes the subject to the second lesson in Bhagavad Gita, which is
Careful of lust. Be careful of lust.
no, that's there.
Stand and fight.
Huh?
Stand and fight.
Stand and fight. No, not that one.
Do your duties. He talks about duties.
That's okay. You're getting close. False ego runs on two tracks, right? I and
Mine.
I. So these are the first two instructions of Bhagavad Gita. Who is I? Huh? You're not the body. And mine. That starts with text 247. Karmanya vedikaraste ma paleshu kanachana ma karma palahetu bhurmate samgostu karmani. You have a right to perform your prescribed duty, but you are not entitled to the fruits of action. Now, how many of you have a job? And why do you go to work?
So they don't take my house away.
That's your motivation. That's your motivation. Why do you go to work?
I guess because I have to.
Huh?
I guess because I have to.
No. Why do you go to work? Yeah. You go to work because they pay you.
Oh, yeah.
Right? If they didn't pay you, would you go there? No, of course not. So, we're in a culture which teaches us the dharma of fruitive work. Right? Our culture teaches us that. You have to have a job. You have to make money. Somebody said earlier, you're supposed to have money. This is our culture, right? You're supposed to work. So, but in our culture, how do we work? Our culture shows us to do that in a fruitive way. You go to work, they pay you, you take that money, and then you use it to get the things that you want. But this is a fruitive mentality. I'm going there because I want the result. I want the fruits. But Krishna's telling us, don't do that. Why? Because when we have that kind of consciousness, that consciousness requires us, forces us to come back and take another birth in this world. I want the result, I have to come back and get the result. So Krishna is telling us you're not entitled to the fruits of action, because then, if you free yourself from that consciousness, then you can free yourself from this material world. I and mine, the two most important things of our ego, our false ego. You're not entitled to the fruits of action. Never consider yourself to be the cause of the results of your activities, and never be attached to not doing your duty. So, 1988, I was reading Bhagavad Gita. I read that verse, and I'm like, wow, Krishna's talking about economics. What is that? Because what is economics? This word, it comes from Greek, economos, and the Greek word economos means household. Economics means, how do I get what I need to live? Basically, this word. And this means food, shelter, clothing. This is economy. And Krishna says a lot about economics in Bhagavad Gita. He doesn't use that word. You won't find that word once in the whole book. But he talks about economics in other words, such as work, the fruits of work, desire, or your motivation for work, duty. All these things can be understood as, in modern terms, as economics. So we want to look at how does Krishna use, we want to look at Krishna's instructions in this way and try to understand how Krishna is telling us how to do our economics. And by the way, don't let me forget, I have a handout for you. I've only got 30 copies, I hope there's enough. But it's on the internet if there's none. This, what I'm speaking about actually today, is going to be volume 2 of my work. First volume deals with a explanation of modern economic activity according to the gunas, or according to consciousness. All the other economic writers, they talk about interest rates and balance of trade and derivatives and all this kind of stuff. But economics it's not a natural science like you talk about electricity, right, and volts and amps, amperes and stuff like that. Economics is a completely created by human beings. Therefore, if we want to understand economics, we have to understand human beings. And to understand human beings, of course, we have to understand the gunas. So this present volume is an explanation of economics according to the gunas, and we see that there's different ways that people have handled their economics in the past according to different consciousness. Anyway, so that's what that book's about. The next volume is going to be, how does Krishna tell us to do our economics? He says you're not entitled to the fruits of action. Okay, you do your duty, but you're not entitled to the fruits of action. So then the next question is, okay, well, then how do I survive? Right? If I'm not entitled to, I'm working for some result, but if the result's not for me, how am I going to live? Well, we can't answer that question in the context of modern civilization. Right? In other words, you can't take modern civilization and impose it on Bhagavad Gita and then come up with the right answer. I'll give you an example. Where Krishna says, Natvevaham jadudnasam. Never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor in the future shall any of this cease to be. Well, somebody, if they're trying to impose their present thought on Bhagavad Gita, they will say, this Bhagavad Gita is crazy. July 27th, 1983, that was my birthday. Before that, I didn't exist. And my grandfather, he died 3 years ago, so what does it mean? Never in the future shall we ever cease to be. Bhagavad Gita is nuts, right? We can't take our existing ideas and try to impose it on Bhagavad Gita and have it make sense. We have to instead reframe our understanding of reality according to Bhagavad Gita. The same thing applies in economics. If we say you're not entitled, you do your work, but you're not entitled to the fruits of action, then we say, well, in the context of modern civilization, how are you going to do that? So it doesn't work. It doesn't fit. It's like trying to put a square peg in a round hole. So what we have to do is we have to say, well, what are the conditions? What would the conditions have to be in order for us to follow that instruction? So then we have to start looking at the world in a different way and see how is it going to work. In the box, in the bottom, one of the corners, there's the handout. You can bring me one of those, please? No. Another corner. No. No. There's more. Yes. Thank you. Up here, by the way, this is my contact information, my blogs, my website, and so on. When I have time, I make an analysis of economic news, and you'll find that on my website. On the Gita on the Spiritual Economics blog, I try to keep it in the positive spiritual side. On the Gita blog, Gita is our Pranasham community in Eastern Europe, and we're trying to live the philosophy of Bhagavad Gita, and we have now 5 communities, 3 communities in formation, 2 are in practice, communities in Russia, Lithuania, Moldova, and Ukraine, trying to establish an example of how we live the philosophy of Bhagavad Gita. So, Krishna, he speaks quite a bit about economics in Bhagavad Gita. And let's take a look at some of the other verses, because if we look at all of these verses together, we can actually see or identify an economic system. So from the 2nd chapter, these verses from 247 to 251, Krishna says, as we just mentioned, you're not entitled to the fruits of action. Never consider yourself, never be attached to not doing your duty. So these two parts, they relate directly to economic activity. Everybody should have a duty, and they should always be doing their duty. Later, he says, "O Arjuna, perform your duty and abandon all attachment to success and failure. Such evenness of mind is called yoga. Dhananjaya, rid yourself of all fruitive activities by devotional service and surrender fully to that consciousness. Those who want to enjoy the fruits of their work are misers." Now, that's an interesting point. Those who want the fruits of their works are misers. So, we generally think about miser as a person who has a lot of money and he doesn't want to spend it. But miser means a person who doesn't know the proper value of something, right? So money is meant to be spent. If you don't use it if you don't spend it, then you're not using it properly. In this case, when Krishna says those who want the fruits of their work are misers, there's a very important understanding there. This body is like a vehicle, right? And it can take us to any number of destinations. And what's the best destination? Goloka Vrindavana, right? We want to use this body to take us to Goloka Vrindavana. But if we don't use it for that purpose, we're misusing it, right? It's like one devotee friend of mine, he is into computer work and so on, and this is 10 years ago when computers were much more expensive than now. And he had a $3,000 computer. He had all these computers stacked up all around the house all the time. And so one time he went out and he came back and he found his wife was using a $4,000 computer as a doorstop. What are you doing? You know, My computer is just to keep the door open, right? So, not the proper use of that instrument. So this body should be used to take us back to Godhead. If we use it instead for fruitive work, what a tragedy. Huh? Those who want to enjoy the fruits of their work, they're misers. They don't understand the value of this body. Right? So don't use the body to get some fruitive results. What's the body meant to be used for? Krishna explains that a little later in the 3rd chapter. Yajnartat karmano yatya lokayam karma bandhanaha. What is it? Tarakam. Thank you. So work must be done as a sacrifice for Vishnu. Otherwise, work binds us to this material world. So, again, Krishna is talking about economics. Work must be done for Vishnu's pleasure. This is the proper use of this human body, to do things for the pleasure and satisfaction of the Supreme Lord. Otherwise, that same work, if it's not done for that purpose, that work will bind us to this material world. In that case, we lose or we miss the opportunity of human form of life. So, Krishna continues. A man engaged in devotional service rids himself of both good and bad actions even in this life. Therefore, strive for yoga, O Arjuna, which is the art of all work. The wise engaged in devotional service take refuge in the Lord and free themselves from the cycle of birth and death by renouncing the fruits of action in the material world. In this way, they attain this state of beyond all miseries. Now, earlier I mentioned that there are certain key words that we can understand as economics, and here Krishna is using many of them. Several times he uses the word work, where he talks about the fruits of action. He talks about duty. So again and again he's using these terms, and he's telling us how do we live in this world, which is actually what if you want a simple definition of spiritual economics, it's that. How do we live according to the instructions of Bhagavad Gita? Economics means how do we live. So, spiritual economics, how do we live according to Krishna's instructions here? So, those are from the 2nd chapter. And in fact, practically every chapter in the Bhagavad Gita, you can find verses where Krishna is talking about work, activity, duty, fruitive activities, attachment, and so on. Let's go on to the 3rd chapter. What time do we go to? 11:30?
12.
Okay. Oh, we have a lot of time.
Do you have time for questions?
Yeah, we have a lot of time. I'm used to having a translator all the time, so my time is usually cut in half. But, this is actually the first speaking I've done just in English in several years. So, 3rd chapter, text 8 and 9. Perform your prescribed duty, for action is better than inaction. A man cannot even maintain his physical body without work. Work must be done as a sacrifice for Vishnu, otherwise work binds him to this material world. Therefore, son of Kunti, perform your prescribed duties for his satisfaction, and in that way you will always remain unattached and free from bondage. So again, Krishna is telling Arjuna, you have to perform your prescribed duty, work has to be done. How? As a sacrifice for Vishnu and for his satisfaction. In the 4th chapter, one is understood to be in full knowledge whose every act is devoid of desire for sense gratification. He is said by sages to be a worker whose fruit of action is burned up by the fire of perfect knowledge. Abandoning all attachment to the results of his activities, ever satisfied and independent, he performs no fruitive action, although engaged in all kinds of undertakings. Such a man of understanding acts with mind and intelligence perfectly controlled, giving up all sense of proprietorship over his possessions and acting only for the bare necessities of life. Thus working, he is not affected by sinful reactions. So again, we hear Krishna is talking so much about economics. Work, desire for sense gratification, attachment to the results of activities, sense of proprietorship, and acting only for the bare necessities of life. In the 5th chapter, text number 12. The steadily devoted soul attains unadulterated peace because he offers the results of all activities to me. Whereas a person who is not in union with the divine, who is greedy for the fruits of his labor, becomes entangled. Again, this is economics, right? The fruits of action, what to do with the results of action. And 525, one who is beyond duality and doubt, whose mind is engaged within, who is always busy working for the welfare of all sentient beings, and who is free from all sins, attains liberation in the Supreme. So this is a sampling. There's actually many verses in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna talking about these things. Now we've heard, right, that if they want to give emphasis to something, they say it 3 times, right? Harinam, 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 Eva Kevalam, Kalon, Nisteva. So, how many times does Krishna say in Bhagavad Gita that you're not entitled to the fruits of action? 16. Again and again and again. He's telling it over and over again to get it to our head. Huh? 16 times. How's that for emphasis? So, if we take the parts of these verses that I read, we take those parts which are speaking very specifically about work, results of work, consciousness of work, what to do with the results of the work. These actually define an entire economic system. And we can look at that and we see, what do we have to do? How do we have to arrange things so that we can actually follow Krishna's instructions and live according to Bhagavad Gita? So, there's five basic parts of this economic system. First one is that every person must be engaged in a particular activity. He says, never be attached to not doing your duty, perform your prescribed duty, always busy working for the welfare of all sentient beings. So these are instructions for production. In economics, we talk about production and distribution of goods and services. So production must be there. And this is Krishna's instructions for production. We have to do our duty. What is that duty? That's defined by the Varnashram culture. According to your Varna and according to your ashram, every person has their duties to perform. And by the way, it's very important to understand that without understanding this concept of spiritual economics, we cannot understand Varnashram culture. And this is one of the problems why still after 40 years, Varnashram is still such a mystery for us, because we've unconsciously not understood this economic part. I'll explain more about that in a little bit. So Krishna is telling us we have to do our duty. Next point is, the results of our activities do not belong to us. Those who want to enjoy the fruits of their works are misers. You are not entitled to the fruits of action. The wise are engaged in devotional service, freeing themselves by renouncing the fruits of action in this world, abandoning all attachment to the results of activities, and giving up all sense of proprietorship over possessions. So the results don't belong to us. That's the second point. The third point is, the fruits of our action are actually meant to be given to others. We work for the benefit of others. Krishna says in 525, the one who is always busy working for the welfare of all sentient beings. So this is distribution, right? So we do our duty, that's production, and then what do you do with it? It's for the welfare of all others. That's distribution. Next point is very important, which actually makes this work spiritual. What is the consciousness in which this work must be performed? Work must be done as a sacrifice for Vishnu. Perform your prescribed duties for his satisfaction. The steadily devoted soul attains unadulterated peace because he offers the results of his activities to me. So, without this, it's just material. If we just do, because without that, what's your motivation for working? It can only be for your own self, right? For your own, then it becomes fruitive work. And then finally, how we should live we should act only for the bare necessities of life, is explained in 421, and that's also reinforced in Isopanishad. What's the text number one? Kurbane Maha Karmani Jivasets Katam Samaha. No, that's invocation. Text number one. Kurbane Maha Karmani Jivasets Katam Samaha. Even Tvai Nandite Tosi Mahakama Nabite, right? That right. Everything animate and inanimate in this world is controlled and owned by the Lord. Therefore, one should accept only those things necessary for himself, which have been set aside as his quota, and not accept other things knowing well to whom they belong. So, this is an economic system. And what it is basically, it's a gift economy. It's an economy based on giving, not on getting. Right? Our current economy is based on getting. We're trying to get money, trying to get things, right? But this economy turns that on its head, and it's just giving. Now, this of course begins with Krishna, right? He gives us this whole world. He gives us this body. He gives us all the food, all the air, the water, everything that we need for the body, right? And what do? Enjoy. The materialistic consciousness we just take, and in modern day, without even thinking, just assuming it's there for my purposes, right? But spiritual life means reciprocation. It means God has given to me, so I should give back to Him. Now, between Krishna and his devotee, this reciprocation goes on all the time. Krishna gives the food, he gives the land, and we go out and work the land. The food comes up, he waters it, right? We don't have to water it, he sends the water. The food grows, we take it, we offer it to him, cook some nice offering, give it to Krishna. He accepts it, he returns, reciprocates by giving us his prasadam. And then we accept it, and we offer it back to Krishna as the fire of digestion. And then he reciprocates by giving us our life energy with which we use to continue to serve him. So this reciprocation is always going on between the Lord and his devotee if we have that right consciousness. Now, this economic system, sometimes when I talk about this gift economy, people say it's not very practical. But we actually have many examples of such a thing all over the world. Who can suggest? Where?
When Amrish Ford, is funding the temple and so on, I was told recently that the Ford stocks went up and all the others came. The Ford stocks went up by 400% when everyone else came crashing down. So Amrish Ford is a very good example of spiritual economics.
Okay. That's an interesting idea. Okay. Amrish is certainly giving. He's building a wonderful temple in Mayapur. But there's another example that I had in mind. Who else can think of one? No? Many of you have experience of this.
Srila Prabhupada himself.
Srila Prabhupada and his temples. His temples, right? You live in his temple, I don't know about this. It's changing now. We have wages for sages now. But Prabhupada started his temples. You come there, you don't do fruitive work. You give up your fruitive work, you leave that outside, you live in the temple. You accept only the bare necessities of life. Everything you do as an act of devotional service. You take only what you need, and this reciprocation is going on. So Prabhupada, of course, he's the exemplar of the whole idea. He said, I've not come to take anything, I've simply come to give to you. He's come to give Krishna. He just by giving Krishna, then the reciprocation was there. Out of love, the devotees were giving back to him, and he instead, in turn, he used that again to serve Krishna, and the reciprocation increased more and more. So we're reminded of the Panchatattva. when they broke open the storehouse of love of God and they ate and distributed its contents. But the storehouse is so amazing that no matter how much they ate and distributed, the contents increased hundreds and hundreds of times. So this is spiritual economics. There's no end. It's unlimited. It's full of plenty, full of bounty. And if we follow, if we participate in Krishna's system, we can all have wonderful prosperity all over this planet. There doesn't have to be any limitation. So, now, we come to a time in this world where people are, we have very severe economic problems. Starting with the crash of September 2008. Actually, I just finished writing this book in September 2008. And then when that crash happened, I was at the Ukrainian festival. And after getting back, I said, well, maybe I should write something about this and include it in the book. So I did some research and wrote about it, and 2 months later I came up with another chapter, which I did not include in the book because it changed the whole mood, the whole idea of the book. Because what I found was that this, not only found, but I showed, I proved, that this crash was deliberately created. It's not some like accident thing that just kind of happened. But the Bush and the Clinton administrations were putting the pieces of this puzzle together for decades to create this situation where they could just then pull the plug and make everything, fail. They have a reason for this. Anyway, I didn't want to put that in the book, so I didn't include that, but you can find that on the website. The future, as I mentioned in the beginning, the future is not going to be the same as the past. And they're going to continue with these kinds of things. Now we see the drama going on in Europe with Greece and Portugal, Ireland, these countries in particular, Latvia. They're having so much problems, so what are we going to do? Everybody's pulling their hair out and complaining and fighting and so on. What are we going to do? What's the cause of the problem? Or, let's put it another way, what is the economic problem?
Lack of Krishna consciousness.
Yes, lack of Krishna consciousness. People, Prabhupada told us very plainly, we want the kingdom of God without God. Right? Even more than that, we want to have the kingdom of God while at the same time engaging in all kinds of sinful activity. The four regulative principles are practically being broken in every house on the whole planet. But what happens when there's an increase in the influence of Tamagun is that the demons and the Rakshasas, they get a lot of energy. And so we see they're using their power, their increased power, to further press the people of this world. We're going to see it increase more and more. And what's the solution going to be? If the problem is, now, we have to understand, again, economics is not a natural science. Economics is simply human activity. Right? And we know action and reaction. We know what's called karma. Modern people, they think that I can eat meat. What's that got to do with the economy? It's good for the economy, right? Because the meat industry is so many billions of dollars. Or take intoxication. What's that got to do with the economy? It's good. People are buying liquor all over the place. It's good for the economy, right? Depends on what kind of economy you want to have. There's different kinds of economies. There's economy in goodness, economy in passion, economy in ignorance. What kind do you want? Now people are complaining when they start writing about this predatory economics and the disaster economics, and they're wishing, why can't we go back to the good old days like the 1950s or early 60s when things were just nice, nice capitalism. How do we get that? And there's people who are writing about that. We want to have nice capitalism again. And it's not really difficult to do in terms of how the money is handled and how it's issued and so on. It's very doable. But there's another problem that we don't understand that enters into the picture. I can't do tamagun in one aspect of life and expect sattvagun in the other aspect of life. It doesn't work that way. Right? If I'm doing tamagun here, I'm going to get tamagun everywhere. And that's what's going on. We're so engaged in the sinful activities, eating meat, illicit sex, intoxication, gambling, that we cannot expect anything but the economics of tamagun, which means exploitation. Economics of goodness is cooperation or gifting. Economics of passion, rajagun, is competition. And economics of ignorance is exploitation. And we see this exploitation increasing and increasing and increasing. There's so many examples. There's unlimited examples of that. How so many jobs from America have been shipped to Southeast Asia because it's much easier to exploit people there than it is here. Right? So we have one, Mexican girl who was working for 35 cents an hour. She lost her job to somebody in Bangladesh who works for 8 cents an hour, right? And has to work 15 hours a day, or else she'll lose her job. There's many, many examples like that. So this is what we get. How are we going to... Now, what then is the economic problem? The economic problem is different depending on whether you're in goodness, passion, or in ignorance. If you're in ignorance, the economic problem is, how can I exploit these people more and more? Right? If you're in passion, the economic problem is, how can I compete? May the better man win. Right? But if you're in economics of goodness, then how can I cooperate with others so that everybody can win? Economics of ignorance, I win. Economics of passion, may the better man win. In economics of goodness, may everybody win. So what kind of world do we want? You have to answer that question before you can answer the question, what is the economic problem? Now, the world today is becoming more and more difficult to survive. And people, they look to the government to solve the problem. What's the government going to do? Or if the government doesn't do something like in Greece, they go out and riot in the street. In Latvia, they've been rioting, because they think the government will do something, they'll solve the problem. That's not a formula that's going to work in the future. Because we all participate in the problem, we all have to participate in the solution. This is why I say that spiritual economics is going to be the preaching opportunity in the next decade. Because as the situation gets worse and worse, people are going to be looking, how are we going to solve the problem? The government's not solving the problem. But rioting in the street doesn't do anything, right? I was in Detroit at the beginning of the Gulf War in the year 2000. What was it, 2001? No. Whatever it was. So I went down there. I went down to march in the street and protesting against the war. But when I was doing that, I was just feeling, this is so ridiculous, What's it actually going to accomplish? And there wasn't even that many people there for that. There was maybe 300 or 400 people, But this is not a solution to the problem. Right? My government's having a war someplace, so I'm just going to march down the street. It doesn't do anything. And the same thing for the economic situation. These people rioting in Greece, that's not going to solve the problem, especially when the problem's deliberately created. Right? What's going to solve the problem? When we take personal responsibility for our contribution to the life that's going on in this planet, that's taking direct action against the problem. When I give up the 4 sinful activities, when I take up chanting of Hare Krishna, this is directly contributing to the solution of the economic problem. This is preaching for the next decade. Because more and more people are going to be asking this question, and nobody else has an answer to this. Huh? There's a lot of people, they're saying, oh, we need a new morality. We need a new way of relating to nature. And they talk on and on about what we need, but how to do that, they don't have a clue. How do we get a new morality? Huh? We go down to Walmart and buy one or something? Where does it come from? What's the base? Other people are suggesting we need a new myth, like Star Trek. Anybody ever go to a Star Trek convention, or maybe you heard about those things, right? So they dress up as Dr. Spock and whoever else is there, I forget. And they all go there and they do this role playing. So they think, well, we need a new myth. We'll do something like, Star Trek, or there's one episode where they went to some planet and people were living very peacefully. So let's just do that, right? That's not going to work.
We need a new paradigm.
Yes. They also say that we need a new paradigm. Where do you get it? There's nobody else that has the answer besides Prabhupada. Prabhupada gave us the only answer to these questions. There is no other one. We have this, because why? We have the spiritual foundation that includes all aspects of our experience. It's not just a matter of what's going on materially. We have to understand the spiritual aspect of it. And nobody else can explain that.
It's kind of counterintuitive to our conditioning right now, though. This giving economy is counterintuitive because we're conditioned to get. So that's why it's not easily accessed.
It's counterintuitive because we're conditioned by the modes of passion and ignorance, right? And for a person in passion or ignorance, goodness, it doesn't look very attractive, right? Even for devotees, right? Even for devotees. Because what? Because goodness in the beginning, it's like poison, right? Like, I'm preaching about Varnashram communities, and I'm talking to people, come and join our Varnashram community. Well, we live in a village in Ukraine, and the houses were built 50 years ago. The bathroom is all outside. There's no running water in the house. And so they're thinking, oh, this isn't very attractive, right? Well, it's relative. Huh? It's a relative idea. Because otherwise in Ukraine, in the cities, people live in high-rises. The Soviets had just built a lot of high-rise apartments like New York City. Now, which is a worse situation? Going outside to the bathroom when it's 25 degrees in the winter, or trying to go to the bathroom in your high-rise on the 50th floor when there's no water? Which problem is worse?
Better to have water.
Now they have water. Why do they have water? Because some guy gets paid to go down and make sure that you have water. And what if the economy fails and that guy doesn't get paid? What's he going to do? Is he going to go to work? No. Then where's your water going to come from on the 50th floor? Well, it's a relative situation. We think that the future is going to be the same as the past. And we extrapolate, we operate on that basis. But I guarantee you, the future is not going to be the same as the past. Because they're planning to make it different. In the 4th chapter of my book, I write about how we have the present, how they created the present situation. And on the blog, on the website, I'm writing about how they're creating the future situation. And they're doing it all with economics. There's not going to be a nice future in their plan for you. For them, yes. They'll have a very nice situation, but not for you. You're going to be the slaves if you live. Huh? So, what's the solution to the problem? What do you want to have? Economics of goodness, passion, or ignorance? And the only good answer to that for all of us is it better be economics of goodness, because otherwise we're not going to survive. Okay? This is the preaching opportunity of the next decade. Because it's only until people suffer and suffer and suffer until they realize the government's not going to do a damn thing. They're only going to make it worse. So how am I going to live? I'm going to have to cooperate with all of my neighbors and act together.
That's our new social security, actually.
Yes, that's real social security.
Actually, been reflecting on it, seems Prabhupada brought this, he wanted Varnashram, and we're not creating it. So I've been reflecting on this. It feels like Lord Chaitanya is moving things this way to force us, kick us in the butt.
Yeah, in this way we can see that the demons are actually serving the Lord.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So if we kind of, from the point where we are now, and then if you want to start, do our bit for to create an economics of goodness, then how do we survive? Like, we would run out of business in no time.
Prabhupada gave us all the... Did everybody hear? Prabhupada gave us the answer to all these things. He taught us what to do. He wrote a paper in 1956 called Conceptions of Gita Nagari, which he published in his Back to Godhead magazine. That's available on the folio if you have the folio. In that paper, Prabhupada wrote about how to live according to Bhagavad Gita. That's Gita Nagari. Nagari means place. So it's the same thing as our Gita Grad. Grad being the Russian word. Comes from the Sanskrit gram, means place. So Prabhupada said that the Gita Nagari should be directed by two groups of devotees, the Shrutis and the Shimatis. The Shrutis being those persons who understand how to follow Krishna's instructions, and the Shimatis being those persons who have wealth, Krishna's wealth, and they are willing to use it in Krishna's service. This problem is not going to be solved individually. It's not enough that I see the handwriting on the wall and I just head for the hills and I get my own little house and homestead. That's not going to be sufficient. It's going to require cooperative effort from many people where we set aside our illusions and cooperate. This is actually the sub-theme of my book. What are all these problems of modern society? Where do they come from? They come from the fact that we're trying to live illusion. We're trying to make illusion reality, and therefore we create so many problems, right? First illusion is there's no God. Second illusion is I'm the body. Third illusion is I can enjoy. The fourth illusion is this paper has value. It's paper. It's just paper. Right? But oh no, that's 20. And 20 Canadian. And this one's 10. So this one's worth twice as much, right? Okay, let's do it this way. Here's 5, and here's 10. This one's worth 5, this one's worth 10. Why?
Because the government says so.
No, that's not why.
Because it's printed on it.
You been in this class before? No. She's a smart woman. Because you agree. It says 5, and you say, yeah, that one's worth 5. And this one says 10, so you say, yeah, that one's worth 10. That's fine. Only because you agree.
Basically IOUs.
That's another thing. I was just talking about why do we accept this as value? This one is 5, this one is 10. Huh? Because we agree. Now why do we agree?
You're forced to agree.
No. You're acculturated to agree. She says we're forced to agree. No, we're not forced. When you turn 10 years old, we have a government program. We pledge allegiance to the flag, and accept money for par value of face amount.
It's convenient.
It's convenient, sure. These are all reasons why we think it's good. Actually, money is very insidious. It's conceived in iniquity and born in sin, according to one prominent banker. We accept this as 5 and we accept this as 10. This is simply the culture. But this is the culture, Krishna says, Sarvadhamam Parityaga. He says, give it up. All of these so-called dharmas, this is one of those dharmas. Give it up. Why? And do what? Devotional service to me. And that's how we live. Now, when are we as devotees going to understand this and start to live our philosophy?
When we can afford it. Because
Touché.
it costs more money to live simply right now.
It does. It does. This is why we need the cooperation between the Shrutis and Srimatis. I have the same thing. I'll give you each today my Gita God brochure. We have what we call our Partners for Life, which is basically Prabhupada's Life Membership Program, where we ask for support because we're trying to live to live self-sufficiently. Well, you can't build infrastructure for a self-sufficient community, go out and make money to do that at the same time.
Very
So,
difficult.
yeah, impossible actually.
Yeah.
So it requires the combination, the cooperation of those who have money and those who are willing to give their life to do that. And everybody shares equally in the result.
What is money but just the exchange of energy?
Oh, no, money is a very different thing. Money has many better qualities. That's chapter 7 of my
It
book.
does, but the banks regulate our exchange by giving us currency, which says I can't barter with you. I can't just give to you because the government will tax that.
No, that's not true. You can give. The government can tax gifting transactions they do not tax.
If I barter with them, I have to report it.
Barter is a different thing. That's exchange of value.
Yeah, well, monetarily value.
Well, the value, however you want to measure it.
You're also not allowed to give more than a certain amount.
So much of our energy exchanges are regulated, and I think that is
Right, because they want to control you.
exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
So we have to understand the game that's going on. There's people that control this planet. Prabhupada wrote, there's Rakshasas who control this planet. They're demons. Right? They don't have your interests, our interests at heart. They want to exploit this world for their own purpose. And it's exactly like you read in the Bhagavatam. Exactly. No different. So, what are we going to do? The problem is, we have a game called money. And the rules of the game are very simple, right? I win and you lose. Okay? Let's play. And you all agree. Right? And I win and you lose. And then I say, oh, let's play again. And you all agree. Right? And I win and you lose. And then I say, oh, that's the problem. We had an economic disaster. Let's play again. I win and you lose. Now, when are we going to stop playing that game? We just changed while we were playing the rules of their game. They created that game. Krishna created another way, and He's given us. So he says, Sarvadharmam Parityaga. That's what this means. Stop playing the rules of their game and play the game that I give you, devotional service. Well, yeah. You.
Yeah. When you say Sarva Dharma Parityaga as an explanation to leave it up, can we take it as because I think Sarva Dharma Parityaga, you can do the Tyaga by doing the work, but making that work a devotion by offering everything that you are doing to Lord. That doesn't mean you need to leave everything, what you are doing, and just do devotion, because devotion, to my understanding, was you do everything that you are doing, but you do it as a dedication to God.
Yeah, that's devotion. That's devotion. Don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying that everybody's supposed to leave the city and then come to move to New Vrindavana. Okay? I'm not saying that. And that's usually my remarks are interpreted in that way, that I'm saying that everybody has to do that. It's not practical. It's not going to happen. It's not reasonable. But we have to understand what's the goal, right? Which way did Krishna give us to live? He did not give us these uber karma societies. We ignore Prabhupada. He gives so many instructions on this matter. Machines, Maharaj he read the other day. He's quoting Prabhupada, Bhaktivedanta Maharaj. He was quoting that. This machine civilization, don't do that. So we can't change that immediately. But what we have to understand is Krishna gave us another way to live, and we have to begin to establish that. And again, that requires people both living in this current demoniac culture and those who are willing to begin to create the germinate the Dhanesvara culture. So it takes cooperation of everybody. Okay?
But the whole world is going the other way.
Yeah, the whole world's going to hell. So you're going to go too?
They did US capitalism in China. Now India wants to do the same thing.
Yeah.
And, a few people control the whole thing.
Yeah.
It can come collapsing anything.
Right. So why are we going to cooperate with them?
But as you said, as individuals, what we do doesn't make a difference.
Oh, no. I said exactly the opposite. What we do makes a difference. How we live in this world contributes to what this world is. And as we change our activity, particularly following the regulative principles and chanting Hare Krishna, this does more to change the world than anything else we can do externally. Now we should also change externally the other things as far as possible, in a gradual way. Okay?
The relationship between the investments in stocks and bonds and the fact of breaking the principle of gambling?
I have a lot of arguments with devotees about this. I used to work as a stockbroker, and when I did that, I could very clearly understand that the whole stock market is nothing but a casino. Some devotees who make their money from that, they rationalize that, no, this is just business, but that business doesn't produce any tangible result. In my opinion, it's nothing but gambling.
But any company, what's the point, like, of the stockholders? They invest in a company, but like, if our devotees were going to make a company all together, the money we have on the company, the stockholders, they want to know the money in order to invest and to get some shares, to buy, to sell shares. It's like part of the entire market.
Right. That's the demoniac culture. Yeah? Now, Prabhupada gave us instructions for that. Prabhupada said, if you have a business, any businessmen here? Okay. What are Prabhupada's instructions for businessmen? He said, all the profits should be shared equally amongst the employees. Capitalism means I put my capital there and I take the profit. And I just pay you. So your labor becomes a commodity. And this actually destroys the culture. Again, this is chapter 4 in the book. But Prabhupada, he said, the employees, they all work together to create the result, so they should share equally in the benefit. Now, so what kind of, you have to, when you talk about doing business, then you have to say, what is the business organized for? What's the purpose of business? Modern business is created for the purpose of making money for the shareholders. This is their only purpose. By law, this is their duty in a corporation, right? We could talk for hours about corporations in themselves. There's a whole movement in America now to take away corporate charters because the corporations, they are perceived as being the problem, right? These global corporations. But there's another way to live, and that is simply to live simply on the land. Not for profit, just to live. So, again, we're acculturated this way of thinking, because it's automatic, because this is the way the world works. But we have to learn to see through the eyes of Shastra, again, Chakshu. What does Krishna say how to live?
It's not clear the answer. If a person is a devotee works in like stockholder, like selling stock, is he breaking down the regulative principle of gambling?
He's participating in it. Right? The industry couldn't go on without that. So.
But the fact, if we work for a big company and that finally the work that we do, it's going to be invest in the stockholders in this company. So in other way, we are also participating.
How do you want to live in this world? Is the question. How does Krishna tell us to live? As devotees, we should be thinking, Krishna, this world didn't evolve by chance. Krishna created it. And he put us here and he gave us a way to live. With cows, with agriculture and so on. Why did he do that? Because that way of life is conducive to self-realization. And this current way of life is opposite of that. It works against it. Now we need some examples of these Dhanesvara ashram communities to demonstrate how by living that simple life it actually helps and supports us to come to this Brahma-Bhuta position, the beginning of spiritual life. We don't see that yet in our society. Maybe some rare exceptions here and there. But Brahma-Bhuta, that's the beginning of spiritual life. How many are there? Not very many.
Oh, Krishna's Eco Valley is a very good example of Varnashram in progress. And it has the backing of Shivram Swami, who's the GVC. It also has tremendous funding in the form of grants by the government. So in order to establish those things, so much money had to be poured in. Where did that come from? It came from, bonds, stocks, capitalism. No. Okay.
In Hungary, the government has a law that people must give 1% of their taxes to a charity. ISKCON now in Hungary has been the fourth largest recipient of that money. They're soon going to be the third. Hungary, they have a lot of money. And with that money, they've been able to establish the infrastructure of self-sufficiency. They're not complete yet, but they're going in the right direction. And from the farms that I've seen, they're a very good example. It's an example of what can be done between the Shrutis and Shrimantis. If we have the financial support to create the self-sufficient infrastructure, then we can become free. We have to buy our way out of this culture.
I'm wondering if you can comment on two things. First of all, you said that the people who are actually building these communities, the Shrutis, and the people who are contributing in capital, they share equally in the spiritual benefit. I just wonder if you can explain that a little bit further. And second of all, a disciple of Srila Swami, Radhakrishna Das, gave a presentation where he said that actually in these communities, when they become more and more in the mode of goodness, it's what we see in Bhagavatam, that actually the standard of living increases. It's not, you might have some initial austerity, well, you will have initial austerity, but actually the standard of living increases. And currently, in that particular community in Hungary, New Rajadam, they did an economic analysis, and the devotees have a standard of living 1.5 times that of the area. So if you can talk a little bit about that.
What was the first one?
They
share equally in the result. Yeah, this is the same thing if you go to Arti. Right? So we go to Arti, there's Pujari, he's doing the Arti. Now, if you make Arti to Krishna, you get certain punya. But those who attend the Arti, they also share equally in that punya. Now, of course, we don't go to Arti for punya. We're going to worship Krishna. We don't want some result from that. But it's just an example. In other words, so the same thing applies here. That, like Prabhupada said, everybody gets credit, and he gave the example of the Indian Railway. The person selling the ticket and the person driving the train, they're both, without everybody doing their job, the train can't run. So he said, whether you're a pujari, whether you're a book distributor, whether you're cleaning the temple, washing the pots, and so on, everybody's sharing equally in this result, which we're doing to please Krishna. Okay? So, because it's transcendental, it's devotional service. We're not doing it for some fruitive result, we're doing it for the pleasure and satisfaction of Krishna. And when Krishna is pleased, then he's giving everyone, he's happy with everyone because they cooperated together to bring that result. Now the second point you gave about the standard of living, I actually have to take a little exception to that argument because it can apply in certain, to people who are accustomed to thinking in those terms. I don't think it's a good argument to make for devotees. Because why? Because a devotee, we're not after sense gratification. For a person who's after sense gratification, they think in terms of standard of living. But, again, in Ukraine, our standard of living is not what it is in New Rajadam. They have very nice houses and so on. There I live in a 50-year-old house. It's got 3 rooms. It's a wood stove. It heats the whole place. There's no water inside or outside. No water inside. We have to walk 50 meters to the well to draw water. But it doesn't affect my happiness. My happiness comes from Krishna consciousness. And so I'm actually, I'm not really concerned about what the house is, as long as there's sufficient, that I can stay dry, I can do my service. So it's a good argument for certain people, but I don't think it's a good argument for devotees.
I think when I was speaking with Bhaktivedanta Swami, and he's very much on education, because for us to move in that direction of simple living, we have to be educated how to do it. And I see that, I don't know how many people here are involved with schools in their zones, but I see even in our little school in Alachua that really this should be taught from the very beginning. And because even if we get land, let's say we get the treaties to give property, give land, we get permission to do it. Okay, how do you get the
it's
honey,
the culture.
the bees to get the honey? How do you get the So we need to pool some resources and educate ourselves and especially our kids.
Very good. Very good. Usually when I talk about gift economy, the people are just so overwhelmed with questions, they just dismiss it with, that's impractical. Because all that things comes up. Where are you going to get this? Where are you going to get that? How are you, we know how this culture works. You got money and you go to the store and you get what you need, as long as it's in the store. But when you talk about changing the whole thing, then how's it going to work? There's so many infinite number of aspects that you have to think about. We have to actually change the culture. And you're right, it should begin at a very early age, but it has to begin with everybody, with the adults, because the children learn by seeing the parents, and if the parents aren't doing it, what's the lesson going to be? It's imperative. Again, because we're the only ones that have the solution to the problem. But if we're not doing it, what are we going to say? Oh yeah, what's this? Here, read Dhanesvara Spiritual Economics book. But at the same time, we're trying to live by the way everybody else is living.
We're going to be picking up the garbage just like we saw in the movie yesterday.
Yeah. Right? So we have to actually understand, this is our philosophy, this is how we're meant to live. And we have to do it.
Maybe we need a festival of recultivation. And actually get people from all that know all these things to come here and teach us how to do all these things.
Right.
Spend a week and learn how to do it.
Festival of Reculturation. How'd it go?
Can you, a little while ago you pulled out a couple of bills and you kind of denigrated the fact that they're just paper and all that kind of stuff, but we've been culturated, if that's the word we've been using, to see those bills not as pieces of paper but Lakshmi and Lakshmi's energy, and she's a person. Can you just go with that somewhere?
I would say that it's pseudo-Lakshmi, just like the pseudo-Sita, right? What's Lakshmi? Lakshmi means real wealth. But those are pieces of paper. Huh? Real wealth is land, cow, cloth, things that we can use, because ultimately we give that paper for those things which actually have value. So the paper in and of itself it's actually illusory. We have the illusion that it has some value, but it doesn't. It's just paper. We give it value, because we agree. There's many places in the world where that agreement doesn't hold. And then the whole thing collapses.
Well, what did they use in the Vedic culture? Because if you read in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, they had conch shells that they used for...
Yeah, that was 500 years ago. Money as a medium of exchange did not come into an existence until about 2,600 years ago.
What did they use before that?
They did barter before then. There was no money as a medium of exchange. Now sometimes devotees, they say, but in Krishna book we read how Balaram was betting so many gold coins, so this means money. No, it means they had gold coins. A way of keeping gold, and gold has value, so they would use that to barter. But gold was not used as a medium of exchange in a marketplace the way we have now. It was done by barter at that time. What I'm proposing in spiritual economics, what Prabhupada is giving us, is an entirely new way that's never been done before. A gift economy based on devotional service. This is transcendental. That's what they do in the spiritual world.
So what is your medium of exchange there? What's your gift?
Yeah, what's the currency in spiritual economics? Service. Yes. The more you have to give, and everybody has something to give, so you're never broke. Particle.
How
almost every nation, they measure their gross national product. Except for Bhutan, they actually measure their gross national happiness.
Oh yeah, very nice.
Gross national
Yeah.
happiness.
If the true essence of currency is service, is to serve others, then, and a lot of people feel this way about stocks, about people that make money solely to make money, that there's no real value in it, that they're not giving them anything. But to me, that's not the essential problem, but the problem of not using that money then for service. That you can make as much money as you want, but if you devote that to bettering, the world, because by saying that, then all social entrepreneurs who have done so much to help the world get completely cut out of the picture.
Well, we want to change the paradigm. The question is, how do we get there from here?
Yeah.
Okay? We, as I said earlier, we have to buy our way out of the system, and because we don't have the infrastructure to produce what we need at this point. We have to create that somehow, and generally we're going to buy that. So we can't go there immediately, but we have to understand that's the direction that we want to go. And again, with the cooperation of everybody, we move in that direction. Okay.
Prabhu, is the simple living you are talking, just 100 years ago, the whole world lived like that.
Not just 100 years ago, even now, there's many places in the world people still live like that. Huh? It can be done.
Even in Switzerland, cows, farms, that's all over.
In India, you go to the villages, they're still living like
Yeah, just 2 points, 1 point of question. I caught you earlier saying how we move slowly to this, so it's, what you were saying, how we get educated to, but we can acquire land and start slowly. We can start doing different processes, different phases, and learning as we're going. And it's not that we have to go up and become completely self-sufficient within the first couple months of being on the land. Question I had is that I think that the best way to have, you can see how many devotees are interested in this. This room should be like overflowing, because you're saying where the world's going, and people are sleeping and they're not understanding that. And even devotees, I'm just like perplexed that devotees are not seeing this. And the question is how to show them. Of course, best by example, but is it useful to tell them really, what's the reality of the world, kind of the scare tactic, or is that?
To answer that, we can all take the example of how we came to Krishna consciousness. We all came in our own unique way. It's a process of discovery. So the same thing. Most people are oblivious to what's going on in the world. They're just in their own little bubble, right? And particularly even for devotees, now I'm spiritual. That stuff, spiritual economics. That's material. So. I'm getting more respect as the economic situation gets worse, but it's been a long road. Anyway, it's a process of discovery, and most people, because most people basically are Shudras. Okay, let's understand that. So, and Shudra means a person, they can't understand those things. They just live according to the way they're given to live. Society requires leaders, which are Kshatriyas, and those people, they require Brahmanas. So, the Brahmanas, those who are the Brahmanas, he understands what to do. Based on Shastra, based on his understanding, his Vijnana. And the Kshatriya, he knows how to do. So Prabhupada said it requires both, Kshatriya and Brahmana. The Kshatriya doesn't have, or the Brahmana, he doesn't have the passion to do it. He knows what to do, but hey, it's up to you, The Kshatriya, he's got the rajas. Come on, let's go get it done. We need both. And actually, we have a problem with leadership for this. In my experience, when I went to Ukraine, when I went to Eastern Europe, I was looking around for leaders to train for this. They're very hard to find. Because we have a culture in our society that it's okay just to do business and get money. And so all the men who are competent, that's what they're doing. And we say that's okay. But the actual business of a Vaishya, what? Land and cow. But we say, oh no, it's okay to do business, and all our Vaishyas are doing business, and nobody's taking care of the land and cow.
Yeah.
This is the problem. Because we mixed the two cultures up. We have to understand, again, what's the goal? What's the culture that we want to achieve? And we have to understand, that's the direction we have to go. Huh? And we have to get our leaders, our men with ability to take that up.
Can the Vaishyas be these leaders? Can they be the...
To an extent, only to an extent, because they don't have the nature.
Yeah.
A Vaishya can't be a Kshatriya, and a Kshatriya can't be a Brahmana. These are different qualities. So it begins, of course, with the Brahmins. Prabhupada wanted to establish a Brahminical class of men because the Brahmin can create a Kshatriya. Huh? If the Kshatriya is willing to follow. That's the other thing I run into is the men with ability, because in this world they do whatever they want because they've got the money, so they're not really interested in following a Brahmana. Hey, I know what to do. Right? So we need some, it's actually spiritual growth. It's in the spiritual growth also.
You mentioned that the businessman, the profit has to be distributed among the employees.
This is Prabhupada's statement.
So suppose if he gets a loss, what he has to do?
If he has a loss, the circumstances in which we are living is not Vedic culture. First, understand that. Okay, in Vedic culture, there is no loss unless you have a drought or something like that. In agriculturally based economy, you don't have an economic problem. This economic problem of loss only comes because we're having economics of Rajagun and Tamagun. And then, of course, if there's a loss, the businessman, if it's too great, he just closes the business and everybody loses. If it's small, then he'll take the loss for a while, or the stockholders, but that's a whole different idea. You see, we have to shift the thinking of, from this current paradigm of money economy, we have to shift it to what is the Krishna culture and how does that work? And that's what we have to focus on. Now, we only have a few minutes left, so if there's any quick questions, then the devotees, there's some devotees in here who are working with Bhaktivedanta Maharaj. Mataji, you talked about education. They actually have some very good videos here. Bhaktivedanta Maharaj, of course, is focusing on education, and particularly, and also Varnashram Dharma. So he's got some very nice videos that the devotees have. I've got a few copies of my book left, maybe about 10 are there, something like that. If you can purchase one for me today, I would appreciate it because it will help my travel expense to come to America. They're going to sell on the internet for $20 plus shipping and handling. So here I've done the shipping and handling for you. If you can purchase one, I'd appreciate it. Again, there's information on my blogs and websites, and you can keep up with me on what's going on there. I would like to invite you to, if you're interested in this, to participate on my Gita Grad blog, which is the idea of actually living our philosophy. This is the only thing that's going to make a difference. We have a wonderful philosophy, but we have to live it. And until we start to do that, if we don't do that, it's not going to make any difference. When we do that, we can lead the world.
I just got a question about, you're mentioning how people were interested in going back to simpler, like 50s. At the time in the 50s was still pretty, had some pretty interesting machines back then. Like the Industrial Revolution is when the machines came, right?
I was talking economically. That was your last lifetime, right? You don't remember.
Wait, say again?
I was speaking economically, not in terms of Uber karma or the whole society. People. There was a time there was more sattva then.
Right.
So people they want to have the current culture, but with more sattva, right? They want it to be nice.
Okay. So you're saying they don't want to go back to the 50s and what they were doing, but just have it be nice, but still be.
Yeah, they want it to be nice like the 50s, but they don't understand that comes from sattva, and there is no sattva.
Right, so I guess the question I'm asking is, does it really have to be an all or nothing kind of thing, or we have to live exactly like the Vedic things, or we're just screwed because...
So, okay, I understand your question. So look,
the 50s had still had
here we're in getting deeper and deeper in Tamagun, right? Now, how are we going to get out of that? The easiest, you can do things with Sattva-gun, right? We can stop eating meat. We can now start doing Hatha Yoga. We can, do some things like that. In the book, I talk about this. And then we come up to Rajagun. Okay, that's nice. That's better. Okay, it's working better for everyone. Now, do we stop there? Why should we stop there? Why not keep going? Or why not, should we stop at goodness? Why don't we go all the way to Shuddhasattva, the transcendental goodness?
Well, yeah, so transcendental goodness is something I understand. If you are using machines, even the machines become transcendental, and it's not really Raja anymore.
We don't have time for that argument. When you're in Sattva-gun, you don't have an interest in that. Okay?
The whole question I'm asking is because it could be a lot easier to convince people okay, maybe we're going to do this much suffix, but still have a few machines, and at least we're moving in the right direction.
We go there in steps.
Okay.
We're not going to do this in one big single leap.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So steps. Gradually we can use what they call appropriate technology, but where the person does the work and the machine helps him.
Right.
This is okay. Okay, quick.
How to apply the spiritual economic when you already live in the city?
How to apply. Spiritual economics is an economics of giving. So you figure out what you want to give to the world and you make that your consciousness. You stop thinking about getting and you simply think about giving. What do I have to give? And then of course the best thing to give is Krishna consciousness.
This is just a comment about Radhanath Maharaj, how he's engaging his disciples, computer scientists, doctors, engineers, and very highly qualified people, not necessarily telling them to go back to the land and have cows. But so, I think at the individual level, one needs the guidance of a spiritual master to understand what's Varna and Ashrama. It's not something that can be done just by picking up the idea and running with it.
This is called the Brahmana. You need Brahmana and Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra, the whole society. So Maharaj, he's created a wonderful example in Chaupati, which works according to that time, place, and circumstance. They're trying to duplicate that in other areas, and Niranjan Maharaj is making a big effort to try to duplicate that same success throughout Ukraine. It's not working as well. It's different circumstances, it's a different culture, and so on. Again, we want to live. Why stay in Ugra Karma and try to be Krishna conscious in the middle of the city? Why?
Where do you define Ugra Karma?
Huh?
Where do you quickly define Ugra Karma?
Ugra Karma means this machine civilization.
That's it.
Yeah, basically.
Radhanath Swami also has seen that he's been trying to cultivate all these people in the city and had great hopes that they'll be able to keep Krishna conscious and getting to their service. But now they're seeing that all their children, even though the families are very Krishna conscious, the children are going to the Karmi school in the city and going away.
Oh.
So now he has seen the need and he has a community that he's trying to develop to transform and move.
The Belgian farm. Very nice example is the farm community also. Oh yeah. Oh, before everybody leaves, here we have this handout, so you can distribute these. There's more in the back, right? Right here, you distribute them. And this is so. I think we should end. I can talk with you individually just for a short time. I have to leave at 12:30. So thank you very much for coming, and please take this seriously. Okay, it's the future of the world. You are the future of the world. The devotees, they're the only ones that can save this planet. Please. Hare Krishna. Thank you.